Hello and welcome to the Common Weal Policy Podcast. I'm Craig DL, I'm the Head of Policy and Research at Common Weal, and this week I'm joined by two special guests. I have Chris Hellawell and Alice McGillicuddy from the Edinburgh Tool Library. Welcome to the pair of you. How are you doing?
Grand, super.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
So now I've talked a little bit about tool libraries on the podcast before. I've written a bit about them in things like Common Weal's Common Home Plan. But for folk who are new or folk who are just starting to get into this idea, what is a tool library?
Over to you,
Alice. So a tool library, I've been learning all about this recently. So I've joined the tool library last year, and I was astounded to find all of the different aspects that are part of it. So in the most simple terms, it's like a regular library. You can have a membership and you borrow tools from our inventory, but it expands far beyond that into things like a charitable program. We have workshop spaces, and then we also do a lot of networking, community work to help support other tool libraries. So it is many things in one thing.
And why? Why as a tool library is the next question from that. Why would you? What's the advantages of borrowing tools or for DIY or whatever compared to buying them?
I mean, I think the sort of fundamentally it's about sharing resources and valuing the resources that have gone into making an object that is very useful, but is often only used occasionally. And obviously, you go out there and you pay £100 to buy a fancy new drill, and you use it once in a while, and maybe use it for the job that you had in mind, and then it sits in the cupboard, gathers dust, and then 6 years later, when you go to put another shelf up, the battery's duff, and you've wasted all that money, and you've got very little out of it. What we're about is maximising the usefulness of all the objects in our inventory, which obviously, in terms of the environment, that means that multiples don't need to be made in the first place, but it also means that sharing is a much more efficient way and financially of getting things that are already in the community into as many hands as possible. So it saves people money as well as reducing the carbon footprint.
So can you tell us the history of Edinburgh Tool Library in particular, and then the history of how both of you got involved with it?
I guess I'm the furniture, so I should probably start with that. So I actually I went to visit the Toronto Tool Library in about 2014. I had a visit from a mate who lived in Toronto, and I was sort of returning the visit, and she said, "Oh, there's this great place, you should go and check it out." I was starting to get into social enterprise, and my academic background is in environmental science and kind of carbon accounting stuff. So I popped in, spent the day there, and kind of saw not just the environmental aspect, but the social aspect of what a community resource like this can do for for all the people in that community, not just those that are motivated from a sustainability environmental perspective. And I just thought, right, it's a total no-brainer. I can't wait to get involved in the Edinburgh Tool Library when I get home, because it's such a straightforward, easy decision to have one of these. There must be one already. And I got home and I Googled it, and I was like, all right, it doesn't seem to be one in Edinburgh, right? Well, how far afield do I need to go? And the nearest one was in Berlin. So I thought, that's not, that's going to undo all my good work with reducing my carbon footprint if I go to Berlin every time to borrow a drill. So so we basically just from that, it was like, right, a sort of side hustle to my sort of full-time job. Just trying to get this thing off the ground. A lot of tools stored in my spare room, and then as we got a little bigger, we would rent a space at the police box on Leith Walk in Edinburgh once a week. And the system that we use, people book tools ahead of time, so we would take what needed to go out, and then it grew, and we got I got a space, so I didn't have to have the tools in the spare room anymore, which meant I could start involving other people and have volunteers that I didn't have to give me house keys to. And then from there, we got involved in the project down at Custom Lane in Leith, where we got a hold of a workshop space, and you know, something akin to what we do now started to kind of take shape. So we had the, you know, the lending and the community workshop space, and then Alice has come on board more recently, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm the newbie, yeah. And I've only worked for the Tool Library within the context of COVID, so it's been strange and wonderful. You know, it's been a really amazing time to see, like, I think you see an organization at its best when it's having to adapt and having to just roll with it. You know, it's an incredible thing to watch, and I feel really lucky for that. But I'd heard of tool libraries before, but it wasn't something that was necessarily in my background. And I've like to consider myself environmentally conscious, but my background is more in community organizing. So I moved here from New Orleans about 2 years ago, and I was running a makerspace for women and non-binary artists, thinking a lot about kind of the benefits of that kind of hands-on practical art and DIY and that kind of stuff, and how you share those resources with the community in an intersectional way, you know, kind of the access over excess, but more in terms of art and connection and agency, less on the environmental aspect. And I always kind of moonlighted as a prop fabricator and set deck, and had my own making practice as well. So when I moved here and came across this job, I was kind of like, ooh, this is kind of both of the things. I'm the workshop manager and the community outreach manager. So I get to do that kind of grunt work that I love, which is just like, you know, give me a sander and I'll do that for 8 hours happily. But also I get to have that kind of benefit of connecting with people. And I think I've been really into the phrase, you know, make haste slowly recently, because I think when you're in that environment, you realize how attentive you need to be to what you're doing. And that applies to making something, but also like making choices and interacting in your world. So it's been a really a surprising but kind of perfect fit for me in terms of my interests and what I hope to, you know, bring to the table.
Heard that phrase, hurry slower, from a martial arts teacher, and I guess the mindset, that concentration that you need to complete a detailed task is very similar. I have to say, I'm also fascinated by the concept of art workshops and maker spaces, where which obviously Alice has an overlap with the work you've done, and just giving people a place to create.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's like, I think the kind of imaginative thinking we need to have when we're trying to make policy and think about our futures is one that feels like, you know, it's quite serious, but actually it requires a lot of creativity and a lot of imagination. And I think that is born often from spaces like, you know, where you are just actually making something.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think what's really important about maker spaces, you know, certainly our workshop, but I think you know, more broadly, I think having that sort of shoulder to shoulder conversation, you know, a lot of people talk about, you know, that when there's something to work on, that the barriers drop. And I think there's an awful lot of people that are part of our community that come from all different backgrounds, from all parts of the world, and I think it's really important to create safe spaces for those people to mix. I think there's a lot of attention on you know, supporting disadvantaged groups, but I also think there's a lot of value in people who maybe don't identify as having some sort of disadvantage, but meeting someone who you know, who is different to them, and actually realizing that there's much more that we have in common that makes us different. And I think that's a great thing to do in a space where you're being creative, and you've got, you know, whether, you know, you think of it as an icebreaker, or you've, you know, the creative process, or what are you making, or, you know, what's that? This is a great icebreaker. Like, what the hell is that you're doing? Like,
how do I do it?
Yeah, exactly. Can I have a go? You know.
And don't forget health and safety. Health and safety brings
and
people together.
And don't forget health and, sorry, yeah.
because it's amazing to see, you know, when we're in these community outreach workshops, like, oh no, you shouldn't do that. You know, it's just this kind of instantly you're looking out for other people, and it's amazing.
So Alice, you mentioned coming on in you know, and seeing this transition from COVID, or because of COVID, and there have been a lot of people talking about this transition for a lot of workers, myself included, who have moved from the office to their home, and they're now, because yes, not every job can be worked from home, but also not every home can be worked from. and a lot of homes have had to be modified to create that space for people to work in them. Or people have just suddenly, because they're staring at it all day, got sick of that sugary shelf or the dodgy wallpaper, and right, now's the time to do some DIY. Have you seen that in folk coming into the library, and how has that changed your interaction with people coming in?
It's funny actually, you say about the sort of list of things that are issues. When after the first lockdown, where we were everything was shut, and when we sort of reopened, we had our sort of leaflets announcing our arrival, and what we did as a little sort of slightly jokey design element was on the back was to have a to-do list that people could take this flyer home, but then they could mark down, and then it was like, these are the tools that I'm going to need, and these are all the things that I've realized during that period, that are wrong with the house. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, as an environmentally conscious organization, there's obviously quandaries about producing nonsense flyers, so it's like, right, well, at least let's make something that we can that can be used for multiple purposes.
So paint me a picture of, I have never been in a tool library before. My friend has just mentioned that one exists, and I know I have to do some DIY, and I think, right, I actually need to borrow a tool. What is the process for someone who has never interacted with you before coming in and then coming out with the thing that they need? Alice.
I've had to learn this all very recently. So, well, basically, it like we said, like a library. So the first step would be signing up for your membership. And so through that process, you kind of get an overview of all of our inventory, our hours, the way our pickups work, everything like that. But you also get support from our volunteers. So we have an email that is dedicated to that, where you can say, and we get these emails, say, I want to work on this project, but I don't know which tool to use, or what would you suggest? And so then we bring that to our volunteers, and either the person who's, following the emails that day, or our, general pool will say, oh, I would use this, or, make sure that they wear their PPE on that one, or whatever it is. So it kind of starts with just the paperwork side of it and becoming part of the community through your membership. And then you get kind of support throughout. I think there's also, we have some tools in our inventory that we would want people to use very carefully, because, like if you're lending a table saw to someone, you don't want them to take that away willy-nilly. So we make sure to train our volunteers to, when people are doing pickups, know that they have the proper PPE, and kind of give them a run through of that. So there is, we want to be taking care of our community, and people be having a good experience with the tools they're using, whether that means that they're functioning well because our repair team is making sure they're maintained, or that they just have the information that they need to do the job properly and safely.
What you mentioned the table saw. What are the extremes of the tools that you have here? I mean, what's the smallest thing that you've loaned out? What's the largest thing? What's the weirdest thing that you've loaned out so far?
I think that, well, the largest, because we've got a rotavator. So if you have a field, you can borrow a rotavator. Or there is a like a sort of mobile table saw as well, which is pretty hefty. We've got plenty of lawnmowers and things like that. We've got a 5-meter ladder, or we've got extendable ladders that probably go to about 12 meters. I guess on a serious sense, that they are things that people do not have. In your average home in Edinburgh, you just don't have. I don't have a cupboard that, like, if I wanted to have one of those ladders, I would have that hanging in my, corridor from the roof as a permanent eyesore. Like, it would be awful. But when I need to borrow it, I can come to the tool library myself. I'm a very active member as well. Smaller things. We've got all sorts of bits. We've got tiny spanner sets. We've got stuff for electricals. There's maybe a 2-inch shoulder plane that we've got somewhere, which is not the smallest thing, but it's definitely the cutest, I would say. It's just, if you get something you're used to it one size and you just make it smaller, I think automatically there's some elemental force within me that just sort of, it strikes the heartstrings somewhere deep inside.
Sorry, Alice, carry on.
I was going to say, I think one of the ones that I always use as an example is that we have sewing machines, because that's a tool. And again, that's not a necessarily very exciting thing, but I think people like are surprised we have garden tools, are surprised we have, things that are more craft based, because they think like tool is, power tools. But, a tool is many, many things, and including sewing machines. And yeah.
And I was saying beforehand as well, at the weekend, we were very kindly donated a bubble machine by somebody. So I borrowed that with my 1.5-year-old. Had his pal came round at the weekend, and we set up the bubble machine for the 2 1.5-year-olds, and then all the adults ran around laughing and popping bubbles and having a great time, and the 2 1.5-year-olds completely ignored it. But hey, it's great. It's for everybody.
Yeah, I really do take your point that one of the great things about a tool library is that you now have access to tools that would be impractical, either because of price or because of size, for someone to own permanently. And I've had that experience of not having a ladder quite long enough for the job, but it's not something that I can just go out and justify buying. But I suppose you also have to not make assumptions about what people need and what they have. Like, for so maybe someone does really need a flathead screwdriver, and the only one that they've got that is a Phillips. So no, it really does fascinate me that you can have that resource at your disposal for whatever you need. But have you ever had someone come in with a request for something that you don't have, and how do you handle
that? It does happen. It does happen. I would say the vast majority of the nice thing, and I think part of the reason why we call it a tool library, is that people have a certain expectations, and 99% of the time we can fulfill those expectations, or potentially exceed them. But there was somebody messaged the other day asking for a cement mixer. Now, it's not that is the kind of thing that we might have, and we've been offered cement mixers in the past. But whenever we're something like that, you've got to sort of look at, well, how much space is it going to take up? How often is it going to get borrowed? That's the first time anyone's ever asked for a cement mixer. The maintenance, it's probably going to be have a little generator on it, so it's going to be petrol powered. So we've got to kind of balance all these things off. So that whenever we sort of get offered tools, there's always this kind of equation of how popular it is. Generally, what actually is a really nice feature of sharing libraries is that the demand to borrow is usually roughly equivalent to the demand of donation. So like the things that we get given lots of are also the things that people want to borrow lots of. So we have, I would say, I don't know, Alice, 15, 20, 25 maybe cordless drills. But they go out all the time, and there's often days we go in and there's like 1 or 2 of them left on the shelf because there's 20 people borrowing our cordless drills. That's something that we get lots of, but it's something that's used loads. So there's this kind of like sort of balance. So it tends to be the things that there would only be one of if we had them anyway, that are the sort of difficult to fulfill requests. But most of the time, we've got a bucket and we've got plenty of spades, so they could probably, bit of elbow grease, they could probably sort themselves out.
I do like the statistic that your average purchased power drill sees about 15 minutes of actual runtime in its life. So it really makes sense that that's the kind of thing that you really should be borrowing rather than using,
absolutely.
Buying.
And the carbon footprint is about 28 kilograms, of which I think it's about 2 to 3% is associated with the usage. So for everyone that's manufactured, it's a big impact. So every time you share one of those, there's a big carbon footprint reduction.
Yeah. So that actually brings us into a nice little segue, because the motivation for me getting in touch finally with the Edinburgh Tool Library to get you onto the show was from the conversations I had with over the past several months with the Scottish Climate Assembly. As folk know, I was very, very lucky to be able to give some evidence to the Assembly. And their final report came out last month in June. I had them on the show to discuss that. And one of their calls in the report was for a network of, they called them resource libraries in every community. And they said resource library because they wanted to be thinking even more broadly than tools. What was your reaction when this news came through?
I mean, we were delighted, because I think it's something that that we thought, and we've been told, but we are in some ways preaching to the choir when we're talking to our members. So I think it was nice that it was sort of an external kind of piece of work, speaking to people and getting those opinions. I think there was a few years ago, the Scottish Government did a Make Things Last when sort of campaign or questionnaire, which again, sharing libraries were very highly came out as a very obvious way of addressing some of the issues. So I think I knew that there was it's a very simple idea for people to grasp, and I think a lot of the time when we're explaining the idea to people, the sort of questions are, well, it seems so obvious and so simple, why, like, there must be a catch because they know that I don't know that there's one in my town or whatever. So it was great from that perspective, and it also kind of I think feeds into a lot of the work that we've been doing, sort of brought about by COVID, in terms of looking to support other groups and get one in every community in Scotland. I think that's attainable. I think that's feasible, and it's really nice to hear this kind of support sort of coming back from the Climate Assembly.
I particularly took the note from them that resources might even include skills. So some people might come in, they already know how to use a tool. Some people will want to learn how to use the tool, and you've already alluded to, you have your workshops there to help and support that. But one of the things that I actually got from when I was speaking to the Assembly itself was some people said that some people know how to use it, some people want to learn, some people just want to hire someone to do the DIY for them, and might want to meet them before they do. So
no, absolutely. And I think you said your point about that it was resource libraries, I think is really important as well, because whether so we've been speaking to groups all around the UK, and there's a musical instrument library in Glasgow, Music Broth, who are doing amazing work. There's a group in the Borders who are looking to do a sewing machine library. There's also Library of Things is a very popular kind of concept, which is obviously a little more nebulous. What is a thing? And I think that's possibly why where we started with tools, because people know what to expect, but I don't see that there's a problem expanding to other things that now we have members that know how it works, and the systems are all the same. It's just what we offer. So there's nothing to say that the Edinburgh Tool Library couldn't start offering camping equipment or luggage. I think is something that we, if we're lucky, we need sort of suitcases once a year. But my God, they take up so much room in a house. So why does everybody have those cupboards with the stacks and stacks of hard suitcases on top? So there's loads of ways to take it.
Yeah, I can almost imagine a tourist coming to Scotland, landing with just a little bit of carry-on luggage, going up to a library inside or a rental place inside the airport, and just getting everything they need for their holiday, having their holiday, dumping it at the airport and leaving. I mean, think of the fuel you'd save by not having to move like a suitcase of clothes with you on holiday.
And there's that moment where you hand the thing over to them. I think it's out in Oban, they're talking about doing like an outdoor sports library where you can borrow a stand-up paddleboard or a surfboard or whatever, and it's like that moment that you have, even if it's for 15 minutes when you pick up a tool, even if you know how to use it, it's just kind of like, oh, what are you going to do with that? Or, oh, where did you go yesterday? Or and that's the kind of that connection that you have, whether you're traveling from abroad or you just are in your own neighborhood, is, I think, really what is a huge part of the motivation for it being volunteer powered, for people wanting to connect, for people wanting to donate. They want, we talk about the life cycle of a tool, and it's kind of like, without, anthropomorphizing it too much, you think about the journeys that these objects have, and that makes them more cared for. It makes, you're passing it on to the next person. It just gives everything a little bit more life,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I always love to tell a good story, and that could be a really inspiring way of getting people involved in this kind of thing. But what needs to happen now? So we have this call from the Citizens Assembly for a resource library in every community. And we know that the Scottish Government is going to respond to the Citizens Assembly report sometime within the next 6 months. But what do you think the government needs to do to make this library network happen?
So we've been doing a good bit of work with CRNS, so Community Resource Network Scotland, and there's, I think, 12 or 13 libraries that are already open in Scotland, and probably another 20 that are some way along the road to opening up. And I guess as a consequence of COVID, everybody being on Zoom, it's actually made connecting a bit easier. And so what we've been doing is little interviews and sort of chats with each library separately about what they want, what would help them to be sustainable, to get to operate in the way that is the most efficient, to recruit, to all, what do you need, and you tell us. And then what we're doing now is building that into a little sort of a little model, and basically what we're looking for is funding and support to set up a network to support the existing libraries and the potential startups. And I think it's really important to say as well that that it tends to be libraries come from one of two places. It's either from existing environmental organizations who it's like a bolt-on or a new sort of project for them, and it's maybe testing the water of the sharing economy or sharing libraries. But there's also a lot of groups that come from individuals or small groups of people who have no third sector background, but they are really well embedded in their community and they're really passionate about their community. And the support that they need is very different to the support that an environmental organization needs. And that's not to say that it's more or less, but it's very different. I think environmental organizations need support to understand the social impact that they will have, and that it's not just about carbon footprint reduction. It's also about access, and it's about allowing people to live in the nicest space possible, wherever that might be. But also, if you're where we came from was not part of any organization, and even just getting charitable status was 7 months of back and forth emails and hopes being dashed, and going to the head office of OSCA to explain what a tool library was, because nobody had ever done it before. But we've done all that, and I think a network is about sharing those experiences, sharing the documents. This is the document. You just change Edinburgh for Dundee, and that's your charitable application done, or and obviously make it work for you guys. And it's about supporting them to make sure that they both sustain in terms of the business model, but also in terms of volunteers continuing to support them if they're a volunteer-led organisation like us, or also about demonstrating their impact, because I think sustainability, in terms of a financial set, we always, often when we're talking about this, it gets down to brass tacks and it's about money. I think it's also really important to say, well, the value of this to the community, some of it might be that there's a little bit of income to generate to cover the rent, because we get membership fees, but that's not going to cover the whole cost of a lot of these libraries. However, the impact, the savings that community will make, the carbon footprint reduction, the involvement in the circular economy, which is a huge thing. It's perhaps somebody's first introduction to the circular economy. you know, is being an active part of it. That is changing minds. That's getting people on board, and that's worth more than, you know, what it's going to cost to pay the rent for a lockup in you know, a small town in Scotland, or you know, the money that a council would have to forego to give someone access. So that's really what I think this group's looking for, is support to make that happen.
And I guess there's a difference in the kind of support you need, even just based on the scale of the library. So if you compare what Edinburgh Tool Library is now, with a fairly established, you know, building, a large workshop, compared to where you started in a police box. I loved that. That was that was great.
I've heard every Doctor Who joke about, oh, it must be bigger on the, you know, you've got all these tools, it must be bigger on the inside. And no, absolutely. I mean, the needs, and I think that's really important in any network, but I think in particularly this is that the network should be about supporting the aspect of the tool library, not about understanding the communities, because the people in those communities, they're the experts. You know, if they come to a you know, training, it should be about how to use the inventory system, or, you know, how to motivate volunteers. It shouldn't be about you know, telling them how to, you know, how to engage people in their community. It should be you know, this is how we manage our volunteers, this is how we stay connected with them. But you know, it might be your best way of recruiting volunteers is to go down the local pub and start chatting to people, or it might be something else. But you work that out. That's not you know, we'd never be so arrogant to sort of to be teaching our grandmas to suck eggs.
So maybe this one's for you, Alice. How can folk in Edinburgh find out more about the Edinburgh Tool Library, and how can folk out with around Scotland find out where their nearest tool library is, or how they can get involved with this idea and the movement?
Yeah, so you can find out about us from we have several different digital touch points. So you can go on our website, which is edinburghtoolllibrary.org.uk. You can follow us on, you know, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of those things. You can join our newsletter, and you can also reach out to Chris or I at hello@edinburghtoolllibrary.org.uk. And Chris, I don't know if you want to talk about, you have a map on the go for the tool library.
Yeah. So the sort of I guess the national aspect, that's one of the things that we've been working on. Is I have a database of what I think is all of the tool libraries, but I would certainly say if somebody's listening to this and hasn't, either I've not been in touch with them or they've not been in touch with me, would absolutely you know, reach out to that email address that Alice just gave. But we will be putting together a map which shows where everything is. And again, this is why that network is really important. You know, what we've been doing is chatting to all these groups, but you know, at the end of the day, we're Edinburgh Tool Library, and we want to support these groups. But for every person that reaches out to us, you know, that's time that we're working on this broader thing. So that's why the network's needed, because, you know, those questions